You walk into confession. The priest sits behind the wooden screen. You open your mouth to speak, but before a single word comes out, he says your name. He tells you the exact sin you came to confess. He knows the number of times you committed it. He knows what you were thinking 3 nights ago when you almost turned back. You freeze. How does he know? You have never met this man. He has never seen your face. Yet somehow, he sees straight through your chest and into the darkest corners of your soul. Person standing before him, witnesses who lived with him for decades, confirm this gift was real. It was documented. It was terrifying. And among the thousands who encountered this man, there was one soul that haunted him more than most. A young man who walked into a university with faith and walked out as an atheist. Padre Pio saw what happened to that soul, and what he saw changed how he spoke about education, intellect, and the quiet death of belief. Documentation in 2018. Ruffin was not Catholic. He was a Lutheran pastor with a degree in history from Bowdoin College and a Master of Divinity from Yale. He spent decades cross-referencing testimonies, interviewing people who knew Padre Pio, and verifying claims with medical reports and church records. We also draw from Renzo Allegri's Padre Pio, Man of Hope, written by an Italian journalist who tracked down first-hand witnesses, and from the direct testimonies documented by Father Joseph Pius Martin, who served as one of Padre Pio's closest collaborators for over 20 years at the friary in San Giovanni Rotondo. Now back to the information. His father worked in New York for years, sending money back so Francesco could finish school. But from the age of 5, the boy already told his parents he wanted to be a priest. At 10, he saw a group of Capuchin friars passing through town with their brown robes and long beards. He looked at his mother and said, "I want to be a friar with a beard." On January 22, 1903, at 15 years old, he entered the Capuchin. Novitiate in Morcone, he took the name Pio after Pope Pius V, the patron saint of Pietrelcina. He was ordained a priest on August 10, 1910 at the cathedral in Benevento. He was 23. He told his spiritual director, Father Benedetto Nardella, that he saw his guardian angel as a child and assumed everyone did. He spoke with Jesus and Mary in visions, so vivid he did not understand they were supernatural until he was older. By 1912, he was already writing letters describing invisible wounds on his hands and feet that bled and caused unbearable pain, though no one else could see them yet. On September 20th, 1918, while praying alone before a crucifix in the choir loft of the Church of Our Lady of Grace in San Giovanni Rotondo, the wounds became visible. The stigmata, 5 open wounds matching the crucifixion of Christ. Hands, feet, side. They bled for 50 years until the day he died. During World War II, American bomber pilots preparing to strike San Giovanni Rotondo reported seeing a brown-robed friar hovering in the sky before their planes. All their bombs failed to release. After the war, one of those pilots visited the friary to thank whoever had prayed for them. He walked into the sacristy, saw Padre Pio, and went pale. That is the man I saw in the air. General Bernardo Rossini of the Italian Air Force confirmed this account in interviews with journalist Renzo Allegri decades later. The story was corroborated by multiple American officers stationed in Bari after Italy's defeat. When someone in the state of grace came near, he smelled flowers, specifically violets. Dr. Pascal Robinson, an Irish Franciscan sent by the Vatican in 1922 to investigate Padre Pio, wrote in his official report that he himself detected an intense and pleasant fragrance similar to the scent of violets around the friar, though he could not determine its origin. This was not incense. It was not perfume. It appeared and disappeared without explanation. Padre Pio would stop them mid-sentence and say, "You forgot the other one." They would stammer and say, "What other one, Father?" And he would tell them, word for word, date for date. A professional mathematician once came to confession and vaguely described a habitual sin without specifying how often. Padre Pio, who knew the man's profession through his gift of reading souls, sharply told him, "Come back when you can give me an exact count." The man left shaken. He returned the next day with the number written on a piece of paper. The soul did not speak, but Padre Pio understood. He needed prayers to be released from purgatory. Padre Pio offered Mass for him the next morning. That evening, the soul appeared again, this time glowing, and Padre Pio knew he had been freed. Father Joseph Pius Martin, who lived with Padre Pio at San Giovanni Rotondo for over 2 decades, documented this in his personal testimony. Martin said Padre Pio once told him that souls in purgatory appeared to him so frequently he could barely sleep. He paused, took a breath, and then said something the friar never forgot. He came to thank me for a single Hail Mary offered long ago, which he had forgotten, but heaven had not. Padre Pio explained that earlier that day, while walking through the courtyard, he had whispered a distracted Hail Mary for someone who needed help. No name, no details, just a simple impulse of charity. That one prayer, simple and small, had become the very thing that pushed a suffering soul into the light of heaven. He did not reveal details, but the terror in his words was clear. He wrote, "The sight struck me with great fear and horror, and I was left in amazement. I understood that the Lord wanted me to see the punishment prepared for him. The demons seized him with fury. Though it happened in a moment, it left a terror in my soul that no words can describe. Returned to it in private conversations with his spiritual children. It involved a young man, intelligent, well-spoken, raised in a devout Catholic family in southern Italy. The young man had attended Mass every Sunday since childhood. He prayed the rosary with his mother. He went to confession regularly. By all appearances, he was a model of faith. At 18, he left his village to attend university in Rome. His family was proud. He was the first in his family to pursue higher education. They believed he would return even stronger in his faith, armed with knowledge and reason to defend the church in an increasingly secular world. He told his mother that the professors at the university had opened his eyes to the truth. Religion, he said, was a crutch for the uneducated. Science had disproven miracles. The resurrection was myth. God was an invention of primitive minds trying to explain what they could not understand. His mother wept. His father begged him to come home, but the young man refused. He stayed in Rome. He finished his degree. He returned to his village 2 years later, but he was no longer the same person. He was cold, cynical. When his mother asked him to go to confession before Easter, he laughed and said, "Confession to what? There is no sin, there is no soul, there is only matter." At the funeral, his mother stood over the casket and whispered a single question: "Where is his soul?" She could not let it go. For months, the question consumed her. She stopped eating, she stopped sleeping. Friends told her to move on, to trust in God's mercy, but she could not. She needed to know. Finally, someone told her about Padre Pio. They said he could see souls. They said he knew things no one else could know. In 1934, she traveled to San Giovanni Rotondo, a journey of over 200 miles from her village. She arrived at the friary, exhausted, eyes hollow from crying. She waited in line for hours to speak with Padre Pio in confession. "I need to know, is there any hope?" Padre Pio did not answer immediately. He lowered his eyes. His face darkened with sorrow. The silence stretched. The woman felt her chest tighten, then Padre Pio spoke quietly. "There is very little hope." The words hit her like a stone. She felt her heart collapsing. But then something changed. Padre Pio raised his hand and placed it gently on her head. He said, "But do not stop praying. God's mercy is infinite. Even now, your prayers can reach him." The woman left the confessional shaking. She did not know what to think. Very little hope, but not no hope. She clung to that. Martin asked him directly, "Father, when you see a soul like that, what do you see?" Padre Pio hesitated. Then he said, "I see the moment the soul made its final choice. For some, it is at the moment of death. For others, it is years before. The young man in question made his choice at university. Not in one moment, but slowly, over months. Every time he dismissed a truth he had been taught, every time he mocked what was sacred, every time he chose. Pride over humility, he was building a wall. By the time he left Rome, the wall was so high, grace could no longer reach him. He stopped hearing the voice of God, not because God stopped speaking, but because he trained himself not to listen. Even for souls in hell, prayers ease the suffering of those left behind. But for souls in purgatory, prayers are everything. If the young man repented even in the final second, even with a whisper of sorrow too quiet for anyone else to hear, he could be saved. That is why I told his mother to keep praying. I do not know what happened in that final moment. Only God knows. But I saw enough to know the danger was real. Very little hope does not mean no hope. It means the soul is hanging by a thread, and that thread is held by the prayers of those who loved him. It makes a man think he is wiser than God. And once a man believes that, he stops listening. Once he stops listening, he is lost. He told them that the young man's tragedy was not that he learned too much, but that he learned without prayer. He stopped praying the rosary. He stopped going to Mass. He cut himself off from grace, and without grace, the human mind turns in on itself. It becomes a prison. Padre Pio also spoke about the role of the professors. He did not blame them entirely, but he said they carried a heavy responsibility. He said, "A teacher who leads a young soul away from God will answer for it. Not because teaching science or philosophy is wrong, but because teaching without acknowledging the Creator is a lie. And a lie told to a trusting student is a form of murder. You kill something in them. You kill the part that reaches for God." Martin recorded Padre Pio saying this during a conversation in 1937, 3 years after the mother had come to see him. The case still weighed on him, but this time something different happened. The young man's best friend refused to give up on him. The friend was a spiritual son of Padre Pio. For years, he invited the young man to visit San Giovanni Rotondo. For years, the young man refused. He would say, "You are wasting your time. I am too attached to my sins. I have no interest in your superstitions." But the friend kept trying. One day, he gave the young man a small photograph of Padre Pio. The young man put it in his pocket only to please his friend. He forgot about it. He pulled the photograph of Padre Pio from his pocket and stared at it. "I have to go to Padre Pio," he said aloud. He did not understand why, but he knew he had to go. He traveled to San Giovanni Rotondo. He went to confession. Padre Pio did not speak gently. He was harsh. He told the young man, "You have been living in mortal sin for years. You know this. Why did you wait so long?" The young man broke down. He confessed everything. Padre Pio gave him absolution. The young man returned to the church. He later said that the burning smell he experienced was Padre Pio himself, reaching out to him from a distance. Ruffin documented this account in his biography, noting that the young man, who became an engineer, returned to the sacraments after 26 years away. In the first case, the mother came after the son had died. In the second case, the friend intervened while the young man was still alive. Padre Pio told them, "This is why prayer during life matters more than prayer after death. After death, the soul's choice is made. Before death, there is still time. That is why I beg you, never stop praying for those who have lost their faith. Never assume they are beyond reach. But also, never wait until they are dead to start praying with urgency." Delfante was educated. He was articulate. He prided himself on his rationalism. He had never met Padre Pio, but he was certain the friar was a fraud. Then Delfante's beloved nephew, Enrico, fell gravely ill with kidney disease and tuberculosis. Doctors gave no hope. Relatives went to San Giovanni Rotondo and begged Padre Pio to pray for the boy. Padre Pio assured them Enrico would recover. When they told Delfante, he scoffed. He said, "If Enrico gets well, I will make a pilgrimage to San Giovanni Rotondo myself." He was sure nothing would happen. Enrico was healed, completely, instantly. Delfante kept his promise. He traveled to San Giovanni Rotondo with much skepticism. But when he saw Padre Pio and assisted at his Mass, something broke inside him. He went to confession. He left the Masons. He became a militant Catholic and one of Padre Pio's most fervent spiritual children. He spent the rest of his life writing books defending the faith, especially reaching out to his former Masonic brothers. And holiness is the one thing rationalism cannot touch. You can argue with theology, you can debate miracles, but you cannot argue with a man who bleeds for 50 years and still forgives you with a smile. Delfante's conversion happened in the 1920s. He died in 1963, having led hundreds of people back to the church through his writings. Ruffin's biography includes a full chapter on Delfante, citing letters and articles Delfante published in Catholic journals between 1925 and 1960. The universities were not neutral. They were ideological battlegrounds. Professors openly mocked the church. They taught materialism as fact. They dismissed miracles as superstition. They presented faith as incompatible with reason. And young students, eager to prove they were sophisticated, absorbed it all without question. Padre Pio called this the quiet death of belief. He said it was more dangerous than persecution because it happened slowly, almost invisibly. A young person does not wake up one day and decide to reject God. They drift. One missed Mass, one skipped prayer, one compromise, then another, until one day they look back and realize they no longer believe. And by then, the wall is so high they do not even want to climb it. He told mothers and fathers, "If you send your child to a university where God is mocked, you must arm them first. Teach them to pray every day. Teach them to go to Mass even when no one is watching. Teach them that intellect without humility is pride, and pride is the first step toward hell. Do not assume their childhood faith will survive university. It will not. Not without constant nourishment. Grace is like food. If you stop eating, you starve. If you stop praying, your soul starves. And a starving soul is easy prey for the enemy." The student said he wanted to believe, but the arguments were so convincing. Padre Pio leaned forward and said, "Do your professors also say it is scientifically impossible for a wound to bleed for 20 years without infection, without healing, without explanation?" The student was silent. Padre Pio continued, "I have had these wounds since 1918. Doctors have examined them. They cannot explain them. Science has no answer. So tell me, if science cannot explain my hands, why do you trust it to explain the resurrection?" The student left the confessional shaken. He returned to Naples. He finished his degree. He became a doctor. He never lost his faith again. He called the Capuchin convent the factory of charlatans. He led discussions against Padre Pio, using sharp scientific arguments. Then Riccardi was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. Doctors confirmed there was no hope. His strength faded quickly. Even as death approached, Riccardi refused to see a priest. He said, "Only Padre Pio could confess me, but I have offended him too much." His family begged Padre Pio for help. Padre Pio was under strict Vatican orders not to leave the convent, but his superior, Father Raphael, convinced him this was God's will. Padre Pio walked through the streets to Riccardi's home, followed by townspeople praying for a miracle. He entered the house and greeted the dying man with a warm embrace. Riccardi whispered, "Forgive me, Padre." Padre Pio heard his confession and granted absolution. As he left, he said, "Goodbye, doctor. I will see you at the Capuchins." When he passed away in 1932, he died as a devout Catholic, reconciled with the God he once rejected. This case is documented in multiple sources, including testimonies collected by Father Raphael and published in Italian journals in the 1930s. And that silence, Padre Pio said, was the saddest thing of all. He told his spiritual children, when a soul chooses pride over God, God respects that choice. He does not force. He waits. He offers grace. But if the soul keeps refusing, eventually the offers stop. Not because God stops loving, but because the soul has built a wall so high it cannot hear the knocking anymore. That is what happened to the young man. He built the wall brick by brick, argument by argument, until he could no longer hear the voice calling him home. Padre Pio's answer was always the same. Pray. Do not stop praying. But also do not wait until they are lost to start fighting for their soul. Fight while they are still alive. Visit them, write to them, send them books, send them sacramentals. Do not argue. Do not shame. Just love them. And pray. Pray without ceasing. Because you do not know when grace will strike. You do not know when the wall will crack. But if you stop praying, you guarantee it never will. Tell her you are praying for her. Send her a blessed medal. She will throw it away. Send another. She will mock you. Keep sending. One day, she will keep it. And that day, grace will enter. The mother did exactly as Padre Pio said. For 3 years, she wrote letters. For 3 years, the daughter did not respond. Then, in 1959, the daughter wrote back. She said, "Mama, I kept the medal. I do not know why, but I kept it." The mother wept. She returned to San Giovanni Rotondo and told Padre Pio. He smiled and said, "Now the wall is cracking. Keep praying." No wounds. Doctors who examined his body found no trace of the injuries that had marked him since 1918. Over 100,000 people attended his funeral. They came from every corner of Italy and beyond. They came because they knew they had lost something rare. A man who could see the invisible, a man who could read souls, a man who fought for every soul, no matter how lost. The case of the young man who became an atheist at university was never forgotten by those who heard Padre Pio speak about it. It became a warning, a reminder that faith is fragile, that intellect without prayer is dangerous, that the mind, when cut off from grace, can become its own prison. Padre Pio repeated this warning to parents, to teachers, to students themselves. He said, "If you go to a place where God is mocked, go armed. Pray the rosary every day. Go to Mass every Sunday. Go to confession every month. Read the lives of the saints. Surround yourself with people who believe, because if you do not, you will drift. And drifting is the first step toward drowning. If you pray every day, God will protect you. But if you stop praying, you are on your own. And no one survives university on their own. Not spiritually." The journalist pressed him. "What about students who say they do not have time to pray?" Padre Pio's answer was sharp. "If you do not have time to pray, you do not have time to keep your soul. And without your soul, what is the point of a degree?" The journalist published the interview in an Italian Catholic newspaper. It circulated widely among university students in the 1960s. Her death certificate listed her cause of death as heart failure, but those who knew her said she died of a broken heart. She never stopped asking the same question. Where is his soul? She never received a clear answer. Padre Pio told her to trust in God's mercy, but he never told her what he saw. He kept that to himself. Father Joseph Pius Martin later said that Padre Pio wept when he heard the mother had died. He said, "She loved her son more than her own life. That love will not be wasted. God sees it." Martin asked if that meant the son was saved. Padre Pio did not answer. He just looked away. A warning, a lesson, a reminder that the soul is more important than any degree, any career, any argument. Padre Pio saw the soul of the young man who became an atheist after college. He saw what happened when faith collided with pride. He saw the wall. He saw the darkness. And he saw how easily it could happen to anyone. Square in Rome. The Pope said, Padre Pio shared in the passion with a special intensity. His body, marked by the stigmata, showed forth the intimate bond between death and resurrection. But no less painful, and perhaps even more distressing, were the trials he had to endure as a result of his incomparable charisms. The Pope did not elaborate, but those who studied Padre Pio's life knew what he meant: the trial of seeing souls. The trial of knowing which souls were saved and which were lost. The trial of seeing a young man, raised in faith, walk away and never return. The trial of telling a grieving mother there is very little hope. That trial, Padre Pio carried until his last breath. They come to ask for his intercession. They come because they believe he can still see souls, even from heaven, even now. And among those pilgrims are parents, parents who lost their children to universities, parents who watch their sons and daughters drift away from the faith, parents who do not know what to do. They kneel at Padre Pio's tomb and they whisper the same question the mother whispered in 1934. Is there hope? And somewhere, in the silence, they hear the same answer Padre Pio gave. Pray, do not stop praying. Because even when there is very little hope, there is still hope. And that hope is held by the thread of your prayers. She asked Padre Pio if she should stop going to Mass to avoid ridicule. His response, preserved in the archives at San Giovanni Rotondo, was brief. If you stop going to Mass to please men, you will lose God. And losing God to gain the approval of fools is the worst trade anyone can make. Keep going to Mass. Let them mock. One day, they will need what you have, and you will still have it. The young woman kept going to Mass. She graduated. She became a surgeon. She worked in hospitals for 40 years. Many of her classmates who mocked her eventually came to her, asking about faith, asking about God. She told them about Padre Pio. Some converted, some did not. But she never stopped going to Mass. He saw how quickly it can be lost. And he saw that once it is lost, getting it back is almost impossible. Not because God refuses to give it back, but because the person who lost it stops wanting it back. They convince themselves they are free. They convince themselves they are enlightened. They convince themselves they are better off without the burden of belief. And that conviction, Padre Pio said, is the final trap. Because once you believe you are better off without God, you stop seeking him. And once you stop seeking, you stop finding. And once you stop finding, you are lost. It needs the sacraments. It needs community. It needs humility. And if any of those things are missing, faith dies. Slowly, quietly. Until one day, it is gone. And the person does not even notice until it is too late. The struggle between light and darkness. And in that 50 years, he saw thousands of souls saved. But he also saw souls lost. And those losses, especially the loss of the young man who walked into a university with faith and walked out without it, stayed with him until the end. She said she was the widow of the young man who had lost his faith at university decades earlier. She said she had been praying for him every day since he died. She said she wanted to thank Padre Pio for telling her mother to keep praying. She said, "I do not know if my husband is saved, but I know one thing. Because of Padre Pio, I never stopped praying. And I will keep praying until the day I die. Because even if there is very little hope, there is still hope. And hope is enough." They saw a man who gave everything, even his body, to fight for souls. And even in death, his body resisted the decay that comes for all flesh. Because the fight is not over. The battle for souls continues. And Padre Pio, from heaven, is still fighting. 1968. On one page, dated March 7th, 1953, Martin wrote this: "Padre Pio told me today that the saddest thing he ever saw was not a soul in hell. It was a soul choosing hell, because hell is not forced on anyone. It is chosen. One small choice at a time. One missed prayer, one skipped Mass, one compromise, until the wall is so high, the soul cannot see heaven anymore. And then, the soul stops looking. And that," Padre Pio said, "is the true tragedy. Not that hell exists, but that souls choose it freely, and they do not even realize they are choosing it until it is too late."